आदरणीय गुरुमूर्ति जी से मैं निवेदन करता हूं कि विषय को यहाँ पर प्रतिपादित करें। आदरणीय गुरुमूर्ति जी।
I am really nervous when I have to talk in English. The only language in which I can talk without being nervous is Tamil. But that's not the language in which I can share my thoughts today. So I will beg all your pardon to share my thoughts with you in English. The subject given to me is our potential. Our country is thousands of years old. And so the potentials were always there. So I have to first try and explain what happened to the potentials. We are talking about the potentials today. Unless I explain what happened to those potentials, to talk about potentials will have no meaning. So I will try and devote some time on what our potentials had always been. It is not only the potentials have come into existence day before yesterday. They were always there. If we survey the Indian polity economy, it's all in facts and figures. If you look back in the past 50 years, it is a case of missed opportunities. If you look at the data available, it is very explicit as to where we have erred. Our course has been riddled with errors. This is what I would like to tell you first. In the year 1966, if I remember right, or earlier, Dr. Radhakrishnan, who was the President of India, he made a speech in Parliament. He said there is a gross maladministration of the vast resources of India. This is what he said. If I recollect, it was in 1965 or 66. I am not very sure about the date, but this was a very famous statement made by a president. In fact, the speeches of president are supposed to be drafted, vetted and approved by the cabinet. This is one speech in which the president deviated from the text approved by the cabinet and he made his own remark. And unfortunately, the political system was so insensitive, unresponsive, that remark of Dr. Radhakrishnan was dismissed as if it was some kind of a casual remark made. But when we survey the Indian development in the last 50 years, that was a statement made on facts. It was a very profound statement. Not only we were making mistake from 1950 to 1965 when Dr. Radhakrishnan made the statement, we continued to make those mistakes for the next 25 years. We maladministered the material resources of India, about which I will tell you immediately. We also mismanaged the mind of India. The human resources were mismanaged. First, we never realized we were in a combative world, a world full of fights, a world full of disagreements, a world full of disharmony. This combative world, in economics it was competitive, in politics it was combative. But we lived in a world of our own. We always thought of peace. We thought wars would never come. Even though great sages like Sun Tzu always said, war is to attain peace. Peace is to prepare for war. They are interchangeable. But somehow, there has been a historical error in which the Indian system, the Indian establishment, the Indian intellectuals lived in a world of their own. How it all manifested. Dr. Abdul Kalam has written a book, India Vision 2020, in which he deals with what we parade as our virtues as the main weaknesses of India, civilizational weaknesses. He points out 5 basic weaknesses of India. 1, greater tolerance and less discipline. And we pride about our tolerance. And this tolerance is not a virtue, it's a weakness. History has repeatedly taught us this tolerance has never been a great virtue. This is the first civilizational weakness. Second, Dr. Abdul Kalam says, a lack of sense of retaliation. We cannot retaliate. Christ told the Christians, if somebody slaps you on one cheek, you must show the other cheek. But the Christian civilization never did it. Nobody in our civilization, no God, no literature said, if somebody slaps you in one cheek, you must turn the other cheek. But we always did it. We didn't have a sense of retaliation. This is the second point Kalam makes. The third is more flexibility in accepting outsiders. Atiti Devo Bhava. Anyone coming from outside, we immediately become reverential towards them. Whether it is another religion or another king or a total stranger. And less flexibility in accepting our own people. It's a consequence. Greater adherence to hierarchy, preferring personal safety over adventure. These are the civilizational weaknesses India has to reckon with, and even now it has to reckon with. You may have all the resources. You may have all the potentialities. Unless we also understand, we means I am not talking about the 100 crore people of India. The 100 crore people of India look up to 1 million people. It is they who set the agenda. It is they who think for the rest. They act for the rest. They lead the rest. And my presumption is all of us belong to that category. We are part of that million which is supposed to think, act and work for the entire country. This million will have to think of what Abdul Kalam reminded us. This historical civilizational weaknesses which we have inherited, unless we properly deal with them, we will not be able to exploit our potentialities, about which I am going to talk to you a little later. Then we are not even aware of the damage that colonialism did to us. Colonialism disrupted our social order. It disrupted our mind. Our education system, whether it is formal or informal, does not even bring out these issues. Many of us were not aware, are not aware even today, that in the year 1820 mark, just 180 years back, India had a share of 19% in world production. 19%. When the share of Britain was 9% and the share of America was 2%. 1992. And we didn't produce everything and consume. Our share in the world trade was 18%. And that of Britain, 8%. And that of America, 1%. This was when Britain was halfway through the Industrial Revolution. We were producing by hand and they had begun producing by machine. And our literacy rate was 33% at that time. And in Bengal alone we had 100,000 schools in villages. 100,000 schools in villages in Bengal alone. And the literacy rate in England, which was the ruler at that time, was 18%. And what happened in 1947? Our share of world production became 1.7%. Our share of world trade, 1%. Literacy rate down to 17% from 33%. But we are all told and we believe and we keep saying that is the Britisher who developed us. He made us into one country and he educated us. He gave us enlightenment. The mind of India was corrupted. The 900 years of Islamic rule could not damage the country in the manner in which the 150 years of British rule could damage us. It made us disbelieve ourselves, lose confidence in ourselves, lose faith in ourselves. As a nation, we became defunct. This was the impact of colonialism. Why I want to emphasize on this is, there is a colonial continuation. The language in which I am talking today is a colonial continuation. The continuation is so effective, so deep-rooted, that anyone who has mastered this language, English language, who speaks in this language, who writes in this language, is regarded as an intellectual. He is regarded as more capable. This is the colonial continuation about which I will deal with a little later. Then what happened in the post-independence period? The greatest handicap of the post-independence period was the dissipation of national spirit which was generated during the freedom movement. During the freedom movement, there was a revulsion against foreigners and things foreign. The assertion of Indian nationalism. And on 15th August 1947, the aversion or opposition or dissent to things foreign and foreigners completely evaporated from India. In fact, a very major industrial group, I don't want to name that group, they used to wear only dhoti till 14th August 1947. On 15th August 1947, as a family, they decided to wear full suit, saying we are no more slaves, so we can wear the dress we want. So this shows the mind. I told you about how there was a continuation of the colonial mentality. That continuation is in the English educated Indian. This English educated Indian is a very important asset of India. He is an Indian. He is the one who can communicate with the rest of the world. He is the one who can argue for India with the rest of the world. But unfortunately, he is the one who argues for the world against India. He is partly divorced from India. This asset in the post-independence period became virtually a kind of a liability. The nationalists in India did not know how to handle this. How to handle the English educated Indian. And unless you handle him, you cannot handle the world. And we said we don't want English. Nationalists said this. But how to handle it? So this complexity of the situation resulted in the English educated Indian being alienated from the whole setup. And Abdul Kalam says 3 important implications of this. 1, the blind adoption of whatever was foreign. 2, admiration for things made or ideas coming from outside. 3, very little faith in our own abilities. This became the character of the English educated Indian, which was shared by the rest because everybody looked up to this leadership. He was in the position of leadership. He was the civil servant. He was the banker. He was the lawyer. He was the engineer. He was the chartered accountant. He was everything. And so the intellectual leadership, he was the press, he was the writer, he was the journalist. Since the intellectual leadership was in the hands of the English educated Indian, the weaknesses of the English educated Indian began percolating down to the people, and it in the last 30, 40, 50 years, it has reached the last man. Completely perverting and subverting and reversing the pre-independence mindset. There is no doubt the English educated Indian controls the Indian establishment, whether we like it or not. By shutting our eyes to that, we are not solving the problem, we are not dealing with the problem, we are not taking it up as a challenge. And no nationalist force handled this issue. This had a very deep impact on politics and economics, policy making, dealing with the WTO, about which Bhagavati Prakash ji mentioned in the morning that we are not even arguing our case well. Because there is a gulf between those who spoke for India and India. The result, there are two important instances as to what is the kind of loss of faith of this group in India. There was a German calendar on the world map, accurate, and the picture was so accurate. An Indian said it's a brilliant calendar and the picture is so accurate. He showed it to Abdul Kalam. Abdul Kalam told him, and he also said Indians can't produce this kind of thing. Abdul Kalam said, the picture that has been taken for this calendar has been taken by the Indian remote sensing satellite. And the Indian is saying, oh, interesting. So the English educated mind cannot accept an Indian achievement, about which 4 more examples Abdul Kalam gives later. All this is necessary for us to understand why our policy makers are failing. Why those who are in position, the writers, the intellectuals, why are they not understanding India? They are not understanding precisely for these reasons. They have no faith in India. They have formed a club, India Can't Do Club. That India can't do this. This club has to be attacked. Another instance which Abdul Kalam relates, one person said, India was always defeated because we didn't have modern weaponry. India did not do military research. Then Kalam told him, you know, the rocket manufactured by Tipu Sultan was the one which was improved upon in 1805 by one William Congreve, a British defense engineer. And this was approved by Prime Minister Pitt. And it was used in 1806 in the war against Napoleon. And when he said this, the Indian intellectual, the Indian writer, the Indian journalist did not believe. Then Abdul Kalam had to procure the book written by a British scientist where this fact was mentioned. And Kalam goes on to relate, when we produced the satellite and launched it, India was the only country which could launch the satellite in the second attempt. Russia succeeded in the 11th attempt. America succeeded in the 5th attempt. We succeeded in the second attempt. When we launched the satellite, an American journal wrote that Indians have not done it. Abdul Kalam happened to be in NASA for 2 months. At that time he stole the secret. Americans could write it. Indian journalists picked up that news item and began saying that India pirated this technology from America. Abdul Kalam says 12,000 engineers scientists worked on this project. For years together. And it is not these 12,000 engineers and scientists for years together who produced the satellite, but Abdul Kalam stole the technology in his stay in 2 months in NASA. Indians wrote. The English papers wrote. Deriding India. Whatever little confidence India would get out of launching the satellite and joining the satellite club of 5 countries, one journalist could destroy it. Then we launched the Prithvi. Again the same thing. This technology was rerouted by some spy device from Germany. Then Agni was launched. The same thing. It was something taken from NASA. Then Pokhran blast explosion. He said, no, it was not a hydrogen bomb at all. This is the only blast, nuclear blast, which was recorded in 250 seismic stations all over the world. No other blast has been recorded. It must have been so intense, so powerful a blast, which is recorded in 250 places. We can't believe we can do it. It is this class, that India Can't Do Club, which is in position today. They are the judges, they are the lawyers, they are the financial consultants, they are the bankers, they are the civil servants, and partly they are the politicians. So when we talk of your potentialities, this is the problem. And unless this problem is encountered, whatever is your potentiality, that potentiality will not manifest. And the consequence is proliferation of the India Can't Do clubs in the press, in the administration, and in the public domain. And it is added to this is the infusion of socialism in our midst. The socialist philosophy destroyed our respect for businessmen, destroyed our respect for traders. An army can only handle the problem on the battlefield. And in the business field, only businessmen can handle. But we thought IAS officers can handle this. With the result, we completely delegitimized our business people. We delegitimized our professionals, delegitimized our traders, called them middlemen, called them thieves, nationalized the wholesale trade, and completely crippled the trading and manufacturing talent of India. From 17th century, if you look at the records till about the early part of this century, India dominated the trade south of the Middle East. Go anywhere. It is, in fact, Singapore, Hong Kong, Penang, Rangoon was all in the hands of Indians. It is our Sindhis, our Marwadis, our Punjabis, our Chettiars who were having these entire cities in their hands. The Chinese were nowhere in the picture. But our government destroyed these people because their entire trading talent was based on their resources in India, connections in India. We cut them off. With the result, the entire trading enterprise of India in Africa, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, in Penang, in Rangoon, it all collapsed. Today we want the trading talent back. Where will we get from them? They have all become clerks in banks. This is how socialism mesmerized India and completely destroyed the trading and manufacturing talent of the enterprise of India. The best talent in India which came out of colleges and schools became IAS officers. They became bank officials. They would not set up business. Everybody began applying for jobs. Who will give jobs if everybody puts applications? This is how for 40 years we crippled the economy. Added to this was the overnight defection from socialism to capitalism in 1991. If we adopted socialism without any thought, there was a thoughtless transition from socialism to capitalism. This is the backlog we carry when we are going to talk about our potentialities. And our potentials remain buried under the burden of these disadvantages. What are our potentialities? First thing, in the last 10 years, I have been very intensely associated in debates with the business people, the policy makers, writers on economic affairs. And one thing I found in the last 10 years, when we began talking about Swadeshi, economic nationalism, this country standing on its own, indigenous research, when we began talking about it in 1992, we were all dismissed as lunatics, that it is just something impossible. These people are living in 15th century, 16th century. This is how we were dismissed in the year 1992, 93, 94. But in the last 3 years, I find just as these people defected from socialism to capitalism, they are defecting from globalization to Swadeshi now. You can find in any industrial bodies deliberations, professional bodies deliberations, even in amongst the officials in the field of finance or in the field of administration, you find there is a gradual appreciation that India has to generate internalized economic strength. It has to come up on its own effort. It can co-opt the world. It can co-opt other countries by way of some kind of a supplement. But India will have to be built by Indians. This thought is being shared. This is a very important potential. Very important potential. The best minds in India are beginning to recognize that only through Indian efforts India can come up. This is the first. Second, some of you may be surprised that in the World Development Report 1999, the World Bank says almost precisely the same which the Swadeshi Jagran Manch and the entire Sangha Parivar has been saying. They say localization reads Swadeshi. Localization means Swadeshi. Localization is as important as globalization. This is the first point. Second point, if globalization is enforced in the way it is being done, nationalist pressures will develop and undermine globalization. Second point. And as the evidence of it, they cite the Enron agitation launched by us. They said because globalization was being pushed through in India without proper debate and understanding, the nationalist pressures revolted against it and saw to it the Enron contract was cancelled. And the cost of Enron was brought down. With the result, Enron is incurring a daily loss of $25,000 because of the agitation launched by the nationalists. So, in future policy making, the World Bank should not insist on globalization overriding localization. Localization and globalization will have to coexist. This is a very major victory for people like us who have been working in the last 7-8 years to emphasize that mindless globalization will destroy the national economies, and this message has been delivered at the global level today. This is the second potential for India. And it is the Indian situation which has been dealt with. And the last important point in the World Bank report is the trickle-down theory that allows some 500 people to become rich. And that will make some 5,000 people get money. And that will make some 5 million people get money. And that will make some 550 crore people get some food. This kind of trickle-down theory, this is not acceptable. World Bank should not promote this kind of concept. This is going to be a disaster for the world. This is precisely what we have been saying. So, our thought through our programs has found echo everywhere in the world. As a result, even a muddle-headed organizations like the World Bank has come to terms with this thinking. Once they put it in writing, they cannot easily go back upon it. This is the second thing. Any policy maker going from India, if he has to negotiate in the WTO, he can show the World Bank document today. If we are asked to open this sector, you say mindless globalization will destroy. Your own document says this. This is the kind of impact that our work in the last few years has generated. Then let us come to what is the potential of India at the ground level. Vast and endless human resources. But we have been made to think that the human resource is a liability. Why? We are told, look at the employment exchanges. There are 5 crore people awaiting employment. Educated people. So in India, more number of people is a liability and not an asset. This is again because of the English educated mind. I will tell you the contrast. The talent in India is empirical. Empirical means the traditional talent. Those who have acquired knowledge by actually working. A carpenter or a mason or a blacksmith or a goldsmith. Take anybody. These are not people who have passed through regular academic courses. They have not gone to colleges and schools. But they have learned. They have mastered it. And you know the kind of mastery they have. If you look at the foreign exchange transactions of India, the annual income brought by these people, the carpenters, masons, nurses, all these people, including goldsmiths of India who make jewelry and export out of India, is $15 billion. The entire Indian industry, Tata, Birla, Dalmias, Ambanis, all of them put together, they do not bring even 50% of this foreign exchange. $15 billion is the remittance by this group, the traditional talent of India. And if you take from 1990 the entire Indian industry, Tata, Birla, Dalmias, Ambanis, all of them put together, they do not bring even 50% of this foreign exchange. $15 billion is the remittance by this group, the traditional talent of India. And if you take from 1991 to 1999, the amount of foreign exchange brought by the traditional talent of India, actual remittance, it will exceed $100 billion. The amount of money which we borrowed from World Bank, IMF, in 1990 to tide over the crisis is just $3 billion. And IMF and World Bank are portrayed as people who saved India. But the carpenters, the masons, the goldsmiths, they are nowhere in the picture. Only in the year 1993, if I remember right, Manmohan Singh mentioned passingly about the great work done by the traditional talent of India. Having said this, I must tell you, what is this traditional talent? The United Nations University asked the Japanese Institute of Development Studies to give them a report. United Nations University asked the Japanese Institute of Development Studies to give them a report as to how Japan became an exporter of technology from being an importer of technology 25 years back. They furnished a report of 20 volumes and 11 of which are translated into English. And the first volume I happened to lay hands upon. And the most important part of the report was when Japan began reconstructing its development after the war, they relied on empirical knowledge. They relied on their carpenters, they relied on their masons, they relied on their blacksmiths. And they never asked for a certificate. Let us assume, I always give this example. One of my sons is very good in English. And I put him in IIT and he becomes an automobile engineer. And another is wishy-washy in studies and is a school dropout. I put him in an automobile workshop. After 15 years, my second son, who has handled the automobile engineering technology, which is second only to aeronautic engineering technology in its acuteness, minuteness, next only to the kind of technology which flies, automobile engineering technology is a very acute technology. And after 15 years, my second son is as capable or perhaps more capable than the automobile engineer produced through IIT. But will the English educated Indian, the system, the universities, even we, will we accept this? The entire Eastern tradition is learning by doing. You ask an Indian carpenter to teach how to make this chair or table on the blackboard. He will say, I don't know. You please come, I will make it, you see it. This learning by doing has been the education process of the East. Collecting everybody in one classroom and putting everything on the blackboard is the Western method of education. But we believe in that method of education, With the result, learning by doing as a method of education exists, by which technology survives, by which billions of dollars come into India, but it is not legitimate, it is not recognized. Everybody says, see the Human Resources Development Index of India. I saw Rajkumar Bhatia carrying 2 books, which will say India is 135th in human resources development. It is in gutter. India is a useless country. You know why? Our carpenters, our masons, our goldsmiths, our blacksmiths, our Ayurvedic physicians, our Unani physicians, our Siddha physicians, they are all ranked as illiterates in that. The people who bring in these billions of dollars, you look at their passports. In their passports, it will be written unskilled workers. They are more skilled than many engineers. The human resources of India are undervalued. If there is a method of certifying, giving a formal recognition and legitimacy to this kind of talent, the Human Resources Development Index of India will not be 135. It will be somewhere in the first 20 or 30 in the world. But we cannot even think of it. Colonialization of mind continues. Unless we revolutionize our thinking. In Germany it exists. In Japan it exists. In Malaysia it has been brought into being. In Germany, a factory supervisor can look at a factory worker and tell that this man is competent for this work. And so he should be given a diploma. He will be given. Why can't we do it in India? We have hundreds of universities in India which can testify whether somebody can do carpentry, somebody can do masonry, somebody can do goldsmithy. We can do that. We can't even think of it. Everybody will have to pass through the class. Everybody will have to look at the blackboard. That is what is education. So the Human Resources Development Index of India is grossly undervalued. Imagine, you may ask me, what is the Human Resources Development Index? Let us assume all this is done in the next 5 years, and the Human Resources Development Index of India travels from 135 to 35. Foreign investors will be queuing up to invest in India because foreigners, nobody invests his personal money. Everybody has put their money in some bank or in some investment trust or in some mutual fund. The mutual fund employs chartered accountants, lawyers, statisticians, equity experts. They look at these statistics. Which country is top in law and order? Which country is top in judicial discipline? Which is top in Human Resources Development Index? Then they begin investing. And if all our statistics is suppressed, if the national talent is brought down by our wrong assessment of the country, how will this country command value? This is where a fresh thinking is needed. Next, let us go to the natural resources of India. In India, we have 180 million hectares of land, cultivable land. 180 million hectares. China is 2 times the size of India. China has only 90 million hectares. They have exhausted their agricultural possibilities. The last hectare of land has been exhausted by China. America, which is 2.5 times the size of India, it has 160 million hectares of land, cultivable land. India has 180 million hectares. We are cultivating about 120 million. We are irrigating just 34 million hectares. The entire agricultural production increase from 50 million tons to 200 million tons has taken place in just 25% of the Indian land. Why? 25 million hectares of Indian land, not 25%. They say if Punjab, Haryana, Western Uttar Pradesh, Tamil Nadu and Andhra, if they are properly cultivated, this can feed the entire Asia. And the world is looking to countries like India for food. India can increase, double its agricultural production in 10 years. It is a scientifically ascertained fact. But there is no respect for agriculture. When we met the agriculturists, they said only one thing, sir, our boys are not getting girls. It is not respectable to be an agriculturist in this country. So people who own 2-3 acres of land prefer to be peons in MMTC and STC in Delhi. Again the English educated mind. We cannot respect people because they are doing agriculture. Countrymen, this is how Britishers used to abuse our agriculturists. We don't use that word, but the same sentiments continue. A mental change is needed. If capable people are to do agriculture, agriculture has to be made a respectable occupation. And we have sunshine round the year. In Europe, you have sunshine for 4 to 6 months. In America, in some places, 3 months to 4 months only. In China, only 6 months. In Russia, 2 months. Without sunshine, you cannot grow anything. They can grow only one crop. In some countries, they can grow only one crop. China can grow only 1.5 crop. In some areas, 2 crops. In some area, only 1 crop. So their 90 million hectares is only in our terms 60 million hectares. We are a country in which 180 million hectares can have 3 crops. And our water resources are enormous. And you just give water. People know how to become prosperous. You take a travel through the country. Wherever there is water, there is prosperity. All the problems of illiteracy, hunger, malnutrition, law and order, you take any problem. This can be related to places which have no water. Just manage the water resources of India. Then the Indian economy will progress. But we can't even think of it. Now in Maharashtra, of all states, in the last 7-8 years, there has been an assiduous attempt to harvest water. And you can see in dryland farming, by water accumulation and water harvesting, in the next 10 years, Maharashtra is supposed to surge ahead in agriculture. It's possible elsewhere. These are great potentials. And look at India, what it has done. We had 35 crore population in 1950. 55 crore in 1967. We were importing food. We have 100 crore population today. We are surplus in food grains by 10 million tons a year today. And our buffer stock is about 30 million tons. We can take care of hunger, malnutrition and sudden famine in any other country. But still, we have India Can't Do Club, who will never allow India to acquire confidence. Then look at material resources. This is where as a country we fail. Our material resources are vast, but we did not develop technology. If we have material resources and not technology, it has no value. Take for instance titanium, it's a very good example. India has 37% of the world titanium resources. It's a very, very intricate kind of mineral, which is used for all, except aeronautic purposes, it is used for all other purposes. And for 30 years, many committees were constituted, reports were generated for making titanium into sponge. It is a kind of a ore which has to be made into a usable rod kind of form. Nobody even looked at it. Nobody looked at it. 10 years before, one M.M. Sharma, Dr. M.M. Sharma, the man has cried before Abdul Kalam. He has written it in this book. He said, tremendous biological base of India. This is something about which we all should know. If you look at the plant varieties in India, we have 85,000 plant varieties. If you look at the cereal varieties in India, we have 35,000 varieties. You know what is the variety available in Europe? There are just 2,000 plant varieties and just 200 cereal varieties. Because diversity is available only in tropical countries. In temperate countries, diversity is not there. That is why you see people of the same color there. And we have diverse colors. We have 85,000 colors in India. We have 85,000 plant varieties in India. We have 35,000 cereal varieties in India. Because God has endowed the tropical country with variety. And this is going to be the future victory. This is the area of success. And that is why they want to come. You know the number of musical tunes which is available only in Rajasthan? They say the Rajasthan musical tune alone will be more than 100,000. Each one is patentable. The musical tunes of all the tribals are patentable. We don't know about it. The resources of India are so vast. It requires an Asavadani like Brahma to understand what to do with this country. I am rushing through because it is. Let us look at and about technological competence of India. Apart from the fact in strategic technology, we are virtually on par with the best in the world. Whether it is missiles, whether it is atomic, whether it is satellite, take any field, we are on par with the best in the world so far as the strategic technology is concerned. In commercial technology, we are on a breakthrough in many fields. In fact, there is a book which has been published in Innovative India. It's one of the brilliant publications that has been done recently by L.K. Sharma. He is the Times of Day correspondent in London. He has put together all the facts, the best people have written. Most of the data which I have repeating before you are collected from that. There are at least 30 technologies in India where we are almost on par with the world, about which except the experts, others even do not even know we have that kind of technology. And the most important part of our technological work is, take for instance our satellite establishment. The annual budget of the Indian satellite establishment is $400 billion. If you take the annual budget of any satellite establishment of any country, it is minimum 30 times this amount. Our research is cost effective. And this, in fact, L.K. Sharma writes, this $400 million is the amount which the Americans spend for keeping a museum of all the satellites which they have made in the past. Just the library. And our CSIR laboratories, which are 40 in number, which rank on par with some of the best in the world, our entire budget is $120 million. The entire R&D budget of India, many people say India is spending less. No, India is spending less and getting better results. $1.5 billion. It is less than the amount Pfizer spends for its R&D. We spend less, get better results because we have better brains. And you spend a little more, you will get 10 times more results. Apart from this, the talented and wealthy Indians abroad. India is one of the very few civilizations whose ethnic talent outside India is very vast. And they are in different fields. In America there are 29,000 doctors from India. And each one of them is a millionaire or multimillionaire. In fact, one of the doctors came to me and said, if India takes only $1 million from each of us, India will have $29 billion. Imagine financial capitalism. I had been to California. The biggest estate owner there is a Sardarji from India. And the first dinner Clinton had in California, he was in his house. Very influential people. You go to Manchester, the entire the British textile industry has been taken over by Sardarji, the Punjabis. You will not see the difference between Jalandhar and Manchester. But we have no civilization linked with them. You see the way Mathura is maintained, Kashi is maintained. You see the way other cities are maintained. You just maintain these places properly, they will have respect for this country. You think economics is just market mechanism. It is a cultural mechanism. It is a civilizational extension. It's a relationship of people bound together by history. This is what Israel has shown. This is what China is showing. We can't think of it. Then unused capacities of Indian enterprise. I am rushing through because there is no time. Take for instance the Indian railway. Indian Railways has at least 17,000 miles of railway lines laid, in which one train goes in the morning, another train comes in the evening. I know at least 2 places like that, between Madras and Kanchipuram. One train will go in the morning, another train will go in the evening. There is a road by the side. 1,000 buses go this side and 1,000 buses come that side. The cost of running a railway is 1/3 of the cost of running road transport. From Viluppuram to Pondicherry, the same position. Thousands of buses go. We can only privatize the subordinate railway. 75% pressure on road transport will come down. The passenger traffic, the railways used to be the biggest carrier of passengers. Now bus transport has become the biggest carrier of passengers. And so much addition to fuel consumption. And it is estimated that the stores which are lying outside the organized stores and railways, if it is valued, it may cross 100,000 crores. Because railways is a nearly 200-year-old enterprise in India. It is from the British days. Maladministration of resources. India is increasing its literacy rate so much. By 2020, we are supposed to reach a literacy rate of 80%. And the result of this literacy rise is mind-boggling in terms of the talented workforce that will be available, the quality improvement, the performance of the Indian economy, the market size, enormous. The most important thing is that there is some answer to the WTO, the federal character of the Indian Constitution. We have the central government, we have the state government, we have the municipalities and panchayats. Under the Constitution, all these three are autonomous, sovereign in their own. I will give you just an example as to how we may have to meet the WTO, using it as some kind of a potential. One of the leading automobile groups had called me for a consultation because they came to know only in March 1998. Though the government of India had given this undertaking to the WTO in 1995 itself, that the import duty on passenger vehicles would be 40% from 2004. At that rate, no company in India can produce cars or passenger vehicles. Not only Mahindra or Tata, even the foreign companies which are producing cars here, they cannot produce cars and sell at that rate. Korea has fixed 85%. India has fixed 40%. Some joint secretary in India signed the WTO undertaking. The Indian industry was not even consulted. So they asked me how to face this challenge. I told them the best thing is you persuade the state governments to levy 50 to 80% sales tax on imported cars. Import duty cannot be levied by the central government. But the state governments have not signed the WTO undertaking. They can levy any amount of sales tax. And sales tax on imported cars can be levied selectively under the Constitution because it is a class by itself. This is how we may have to use our municipal mechanism, our state mechanism to counter the WTO. This is also one of the strategic points. The most important point is, which I have already touched, the respect for businessmen and traders is a very important aspect if the country has to achieve economic growth. If wars are to be waged by soldiers, business wars will have to be waged only by businessmen. We must come out of this mindset, businessmen are rascals. We have to deal with them. They are the ones who can deliver economic growth. And an organization like the ABVP, in fact all Parivar organizations, all nationalist organizations, will have to work out a strategy in different fields as to how to deal with the situation. And particularly ABVP will have to deal with the aspect as to how universities, research institutions, IITs can relate to business. And it will be a mutually beneficial kind of arrangement. And in this, I think ABVP can take a lead. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
कुसुमित द्रुमदल शोभिनीं सुहासिनीं सुमधुर भाषिणीं सुखदां वरदां मातरं वन्दे मातरम्। कोटि कोटि कंठ कल कल निनाद कराले, कोटि कोटि भुजैर धृत खर करवाले। अबला के नो माए तो बले बहुबल धारिणीं नमामि तारिणीं रिपुदलवारिणीं मातरं वन्दे मातरम्। तुमि विद्या तुमि धर्म तुमि हृदि तुमि मर्म, त्वं हि प्राणाः शरीरे बाहुते तुमि मा शक्ति, हृदये तुमि मा भक्ति। तुम्हारी प्रतिमा गढ़ी मंदिरे मंदिरे, वन्दे मातरम्। त्वं हि दुर्गा दश प्रहरण धारिणी, कमला कमलदल विहारिणी, वाणी विद्यादायिनी। नमामि त्वां नमामि कमलाम् अमलाम् अतुलाम् सुजलाम् सुफलाम् मातरम् वन्दे मातरम् वन्दे मातरम् वन्दे मातरम्। भारत माता की, भारत माता की।